given the way that the auto industry has now rescued itself with help from the government, were you wrong in what you said that day?
Gosh, I thought you said they did go into bankruptcy, right? And that's what I said they needed to do.
Well, what you said was that was the solution. They shouldn't get bailouts. In fact, the rescue plan has come from a combination of both, hasn't it?
Actually, what I said was that this was back in before President Bush was out of office. And I said, as the auto executives flew to Washington asking for money, don't give them money. Let them go through a bankruptcy process and provide support after bankruptcy to help get them on their feet. But don't just write them checks. And unfortunately, what President Bush and President Obama did was write them checks. Then they finally realized, yeah, you got to go into bankruptcy. And they did that. They went through a managed bankruptcy process and came out.
But the experts don't necessarily say that it was just the bankruptcy or just the bailouts. It was the combined effect of the process of both that helped the recovery.
Fortunately,
so the bailouts weren't necessarily a failure.
No, the bailouts were a mistake. For the idea of writing them a check and putting $17 billion into the car companies before they went bankrupt was a mistake, because what it did was it put government in charge at the bankruptcy proceeding. And so President Obama came in and wiped out the interest of the senior lenders and gave the company to the UAW.
How much of that money has now been paid back?
Well, a small share of it. And that money did not have to be spent. The right process, in my view, was to go through bankruptcy, then to help the companies get on their feet. I propose in my article saying they may need some guarantees, for instance, on warranties, so people are willing to buy American cars. But bankruptcy is not liquidation. I think sometimes people think when they hear bankruptcy, oh, you're going to close them down.
No, I understand exactly what you meant.
It's to go through a process. And that was fine. And the UAW argued, oh, we can't go into bankruptcy, it'll kill the company.
No, I get that. But
the answer, I was right.
My quibble with you is you were partly right. And I think it's wrong of you to pretend that the bailouts had no effect in a positive way at all. But it's the same with the bankers. I am disgusted by the way these banks, having been bailed out, have now behaved in giving themselves these multi-million-dollar bonuses. But there's no doubt that if they hadn't had the bailouts, America would be in a much worse state now than it would have been. You oppose those bailouts too. You don't like bailouts full stop.
I don't like bailouts.
And yet sometimes they are essential to reviving industries and the economy, aren't they?
I don't like bailouts. I think enterprises that find themselves in difficulty have a process that they should go through to get themselves out of difficulty. It's known as the bankruptcy court. Doesn't mean liquidating them. It means going through a process of reorganizing their obligations, bringing down their costs, and in certain circumstances, government has stepped in to get them back on their feet. And I said in the case of the automobile industry that they should have provided help with guarantees and so forth for warranties. That's what I laid out in my op-ed. What we did instead was give the company to the UAW, because gave General Motors in particular, because President Obama had taken, if you will, the major seat at the bargaining table by having put $17 billion into the enterprises before the bankruptcy process occurred.
Are you happy that no bankers have ever been brought to book in terms of being sent to prison?
I'm not going to suggest who should have criminal charges broued against them.
I mean, there are subpoenas coming against Goldman Sachs, for example.
We'll see what the course of history will be here and which criminal proceedings will occur.
But do you think some people should be punished pretty severely?
Well, it depends on who did what. I mean, if you say who caused the decline, it was not just the bankers. It was mortgage brokers. It was regulators asleep at the switch. One of the things that shocked me, back in 2007, as the housing market was growing like crazy, we all heard about these liar loans, and we heard about mortgages being given to people who couldn't possibly pay them back. We heard about interest-only mortgages. And I wondered, how big a share is it of the total mortgage market? It turns out it was half of the mortgage market was non-conforming loans. Someone should have blown a whistle and said, look, this is going to create a crisis. But the regulators didn't, the bankers didn't, the mortgage bankers didn't.
Should the Federal Reserve have done more? Are you happy
the Federal Reserve?
Are you happy Mr. Bernanke is still running the show there?
The Federal Reserve should have blown the whistle. They should have said, this is a huge problem. Anybody, whether Secretary Paulson should have said, look, there's so much blame to go around. I'm not sure it's criminal legally, but it may be criminal, if you will.
But if the Federal Reserve should have done more, then would you like to see somebody new in charge of the Federal Reserve and not Mr. Bernanke?
I'm not saying who I'd appoint to the Federal Reserve, but it's not likely to be the same. Not likely to be the same person. I don't know that I have a nominee for that position right now, and I haven't agreed with all the decisions of the Federal Reserve. But clearly,
trapdoor for Bernanke.
That's
what you're saying, right?
I'm going to keep the door open. Keep my options open at this point.
No, but you're saying you would get somebody else.
Given the fact I'm not the president.
But if you were, you would get somebody else.
Well, I would certainly review all the possible candidates. Let's put it that way.